and welcome back to this week's episode of So You Want to Be a Writer with me, Peter Snell.
And me, Ros Morris.
This week is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to hand the show over to Ros, but this time I'm going to be doing most of the talking, so apologies to you all.
Well, what I wanted to do was I wanted to ask Peter all about being a bookseller, because booksellers, they're the sort of end of the chain for the books we write. Booksellers are very important for getting authors known. They're often the hub of a village or community, and I just wanted to ask all about that. So we'll explain a bit about who we are as well. Peter's a bookseller, I'm a writer, and so this week I'm asking the questions. Well, let's start. Tell me, how did you become a bookseller?
Years and years and years ago, when I was very, very little, I read. I can't remember not being able to read, and so my whole life has been wrapped up in reading, and I love retaining odd little bits of information that I read here and there. My father was an avid reader. He was self-educated, and I suppose there's a family love of reading. Now, I worked in various jobs in the finance industry for many years, and then I became very, very ill, and as part of my recuperation and rehabilitation, I got myself a job working 1 or 2 hours a day, a couple of days a week in a bookshop. Slowly built myself back up, eventually ended up as the manager of that bookshop, and then my lovely wife bought me a bookshop, and that's where we are now. I'm a bookseller.
She bought your bookshop, that's lovely.
She bought me a bookshop. I think it was really on the lines of, oh dear, what's he going to do now? Nobody else will employ him. So, you know, it's to keep me gainfully employed.
and it clearly does, because one of the things we must point out is it's a more than full-time job, isn't it? I mean, whenever I email you, you're always here working. I mean, I work quite late, you work quite late, you also work very early, so I mean, it's a way of life, isn't it?
Yes, I run the shop 7 days a week. I'm normally here by 7:30 in the morning and leave round about 6 o'clock in the evening. I don't normally get out to lunch. The shop shuts 2 days of the year, Christmas Day and Easter Sunday, simply because nobody's out shopping on those days. Obviously I'm not here all the time, and I do have holidays, and I try to have at least one Sunday a month off, or a weekend a month off. But yeah, it's a pretty full-time job.
And you have various assistants who I see on various days, and how many people help you with it?
At the moment, 1, 2, 3, you could say 6 people. There's a 7th one who is off long-term sick at the moment. I'm not counting my wife, who does all the bookkeeping and all that sort of thing in the background, which is important to keep the business running. But in the shop, I've got 3 regular members of staff who come in on various days of the week. And then I have 2 volunteers who come in a few hours here and there. And one more person who does the odd Sunday for me when I need cover. So, yeah, quite a few people, and a lot of ex-members of staff who, if I'm desperate, will help out every now and then, so which is nice.
It's a real community thing, isn't it? Something I notice is that almost anywhere I go in the shops around here, or the gym that is just up the road from here, if I mention the bookshop, they say, "Oh yes, Peter, the bookshop." So it seems that the bookshop is actually something that gives heart to a community, a village or a town.
Certainly when I run it, we act as a box office for local churches and choirs and other businesses selling tickets for events. We dedicate some of our window space to adverts for local events, school fetes, local talks, history society, things like that. Yeah, we're very much part of the community. We act as a letterbox for the Residents Association. So if anybody wants to pay their annual subscription, they can just drop it into me and it gets all picked up once a week by the Residents Association. I don't have to do anything, but it's a handy place for people to go. We do a similar thing with the town centre manager, who whenever she sends letters round about road closures or events or Christmas lights and things like that, always the response address is just drop your reply into the bookshop and she'll pick it up from there.
Gosh, I had no idea it was that central. That's really interesting. Back to books, though. How do you choose what books to stock?
Ooh, I cheat a little bit. One of my wholesalers chooses 30 books a month that they just send me. So they're frontline new titles selected by a panel of booksellers. So I know there's some thought gone into those. I have reps from a number of publishers, from Penguin Random House, from the Independence Alliance of Publishers, so that's people like Faber and Faber, Corvus, Granta, Scepter, that sort of outfit. Children's publishers, Scholastic and Walker Books. So they suggest new titles to me, bring things in, and I choose what I want from there. Every year at the London Book Fair, I have a day where I go to publisher presentations and they tell us what's coming out over the next 6 months.
All right, so this is how you stay aware of what's going to be coming up.
This is how we stay aware of what's coming up.
Yes.
And there are trade magazines that come out every month telling you what titles will be coming up in 3 months' time, things like that. So that there's a general thing. But I have to choose what books not to take. That's more important.
This was something I wanted to ask about, yes.
And the first thing not to take is probably any book that's going to be top 10 or really, really popular, because it's going to be half price in Smiths and Sainsbury's and Asda. So it's going to be cheaper than I can sell it for. The latest David Walliams, Awful Auntie, is a hardback at £12.99. I haven't got a copy in the shop. It's a bestseller. I should have. But it's £5 in the local Sainsbury's, which is 150 yards up the road. I don't want to sell that to one of my customers and have them feel aggrieved they've been overcharged. So I tell them, it's £5 in Sainsbury's, please go and get it there. When you want a real book, not that David Walliams' books aren't real, but if you want a book for your daughter for her university course, or you need something that your son's forgot to tell you about for his A-level and you need it tomorrow, let me know and I'll sort that out.
So that's interesting. You say you can get books really quickly. So if you don't have it on the shelves, you can magic it up in 24 hours.
Normally, I make my last order of the day at about 4:45, and the books that I order then will be with me between 8 and 11 the next morning.
Right. Well, that's faster than the post. If you ordered it online, we'll come to that later. But
absolutely, we're quicker than Amazon.
Yeah, that's yes. I suppose also you've got limited space anyway, limited shelf space, so you've got to be more choosy about what you're going to stock.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it makes more sense for you to have a more specialised, maybe hand-curated collection.
Yes, and it's very rare for me to have more than one copy of a book, because I can work on just-in-time deliveries. If I sell something, I can get it back the next day. I have to be careful. You know, there are certain books that are going to sell well at Christmas or during exam time. I know that there are certain novels that all the local schools are studying, so I might get in several copies of that. But generally, I just have one copy and replace it very, very quickly.
And they often say that the character of a bookshop is very much created by the person who is choosing the titles, and this is one of the bonuses of independent bookshops, that they have an eclectic collection of titles that you wouldn't find in one place elsewhere. In fact, each bookshop would reflect slightly different tastes. You must be very, very widely read, and you must also have a very broad. What am I trying to say? You must have. There must be a lot of books that you enjoy and put on the shelves. I mean, do you always choose books you enjoy, or do they have to be? Do you also include other books that you maybe don't like so much?
Yes, I'm not a great fan of Japanese literature, Murakami and Ishiguro, but Andrew, who works for me, is, so I rely on him there. But I don't tend to stock books that I like. I think it's more books that I approve of, or books that I think will sell. That's not quite the same thing.
So it's not just the books you've enjoyed, but
oh no, there are books here that I don't enjoy that I've got on sale. Gone Girl, for instance, springs to mind. I think it's rubbish, but
I didn't like it either. I didn't think the characters were remarkable enough.
Well,
there's a lot of people that do really like it. There's something else in it that they enjoy, but I didn't get it.
I realised after I'd read it why I was so disappointed in it. It's pushed and advertised as an exciting thriller, and yet if I recast it in my mind as a farce, then I think it works.
Oh.
But I can't really go around telling people that, except on obscure radio shows.
Wait, we are not obscure.
Oh dear.
But actually, it's interesting what you said about Andrew and his taste. I've met Andrew, and I know him. On your website, you've got little tabs for your various staff members' top picks.
Absolutely,
you?
yes.
So that's a nice thing that you can do. You can have the sense of, again, it's there are quite a few people at work here picking titles that they want to share.
Yes, I mean, if I'm short of books to build up an order, I'll quite often say to somebody else, tell me 3 or 4 titles we haven't got in that you think we should have, and I'll get those in. This is deliberately to try not to make it my taste,
right?
But to broaden the stock.
Well, it's funny, I remember the first time I came in, I was shopping for Christmas presents, and I wanted to find books that I knew they were presents for my husband, and I wanted to find things that he wouldn't be able to find himself, especially online. So I came in and said, right, he likes this and this, and soon we were wandering around the shelves and you were pulling books out, and I was saying, oh, we've already got that, but that was a good judge of my taste and Dave's taste. And this is one of the things that I think a bookseller can do. It's the hand selling of surprising things you wouldn't find otherwise.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you can just come into a proper independent bookshop and just rely on serendipity. Just wander along the shelves and choose every third book, or all the yellow books, or something like that. But yeah, you've got to have reasonable stock knowledge, not just what you've got in, but what those books are. So, going back to having read all my life, I still read an awful lot of books now. I still try and read 20 books a month.
I was going to ask what your reading list was like, because I mean, a lot of us have a big pile of books we're going to get through, but for you, it's you've really got to keep on top of it.
I have a huge to read pile, and I don't always get round to them. So again, I farm them out to other people, members of our book group, customers, members of staff, whose opinion I think would be relevant to that book, and get feedback from them on that. But my own personal reading, I have given up choosing the books that I read for myself, which is a great shame, but it's also a great delight. I mean, there are still favourites that I go back to. I read Lord of the Rings every 4 or 5 years, various things like that. And there are books that I know I want to read, but generally speaking, I rely on review, pre-pub and proof copies that the publisher's reps give me or send to me, or independently published authors will produce books and send them to me for me to look at. So I read these and try and pick from them what I think is going to be good. It's harping back to the supermarket and chain bookstores. They've all got the same stock in. They've all got the best sellers. It's my job to find the strange, the unusual, the overlooked, the as yet unrecognised, the new author, and stock that and be able to direct people to it. And that's a great delight, and that's one way I try and do it.
And what about the books that don't sell? Because obviously not every book will be lucky enough to find a home. So what happens?
Well, there are some books that don't sell, but I wouldn't regard this as a proper bookshop if I didn't have them in stock.
Such as?
Dante's Inferno, Plato's Republic. I might sell one copy a year, but I might not. I should have a decent atlas, which you might not sell for quite some time. Some of the Dickens that I've got, Wilkie Collins, if I steer people towards them, they'll buy them. But there are a number of people like that.
So that's interesting. They're the titles that you feel just make the bookshop complete.
Yes, I don't think this would be complete without some Rosemary Sutcliffe or some Kipling or H.G. Wells. They may not always be popular, but they're always there in the background.
Several children's titles. There must be a lot of classics there too that you have to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Children of the New Forest, Arthur Ransom, Winnie the Pooh. I mean, it wouldn't be a proper bookshop if you didn't have them in stock. And Winnie the Pooh sells, and Beatrix Potter sells. But you've got to have some books. If they're not there, certain diet books you've got to have, certain health books, certain cookery books,
dictionaries,
certain basic dictionaries. There, it would have to be the OED. But
we're not going to argue about that.
I know we can argue about this one. But yes, and phrase books, various countries. There are some things you've just got to have, and travel. And there are so many things I could go into.
That's actually not leaving much space for new books, newly published books, is it? Is there?
I have 2 bookcases, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14 shelves, essentially dedicated to new titles. But then, back to your question, what do you do with books that don't sell? After a while, I have an arrangement with my wholesale suppliers that if books haven't sold, I can send them back as returns, provided they're in mint condition. And of course, if they've been thumbed by customers on the shelves, they might well not be in mint condition. So that's a problem. I can either reduce them or get rid of them or read them myself or give them to a school or something like that. But no, basically we can return something like 5% of what we buy in.
And do you know what happens to those when you send them back?
Well, if they're in mint condition, they go back into the warehouse and they're resold.
Oh, okay. But I have heard that books can get pulped.
Oh, there are cases where books get pulped, yes.
I mean, this is hideous to contemplate.
Well, the AA and Michelin produce lots and lots of travel guides and maps, and a lot of them are replaced every year.
Oh, of course, yes, because you couldn't sell it if it had 2013
now,
on it.
I've just had one publisher who published the Baedeker guides. They're pulling out of that market, so they've taken back all their Baedeker guides, and I'm getting credit for all of them. But they're not pulping them. They're putting them onto the remaindered market. So they'll still sell them, but they'll sell them at half price or for £2 or whatever. I don't know what the figure will be. But they won't be replaced, so they'll slowly disappear.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that they can carry on having a life as a book, because the very idea of destroying them is hideous to me.
I mean, sometimes I get in books that are damaged, and sometimes they will go back to the publisher to be pulped, But sometimes I just have to send the title page back. And then that book...
Rip it out.
It's horrible. It breaks your heart. But then I can give those books to a local school. I can't sell them once the title page is missing. But I can give them to a local school to add to their library.
Oh, phew. No,
Like
I'm much relieved to hear that.
So they are reused and recycled.
Well, I think that's quite a lot to get our heads around at the moment. So I think it's time for some music.
Good, I can have a breather.
And of course, I've chosen songs this week that are related to books. The first one is going to be the Eurythmics theme tune for 1984.
Lovely.
We were just talking while the song was going, and the thing I was most surprised by in what you said so far is this requirement to have particular titles, because otherwise the shop doesn't seem complete, and that just leaves so little room for other books. And we were just talking about how if an author has a lot of titles that they've written, you can only have a few of them, and obviously if you look around, the walls are stuffed. There isn't any room to put anything else. And with all the books being produced, huge numbers of books being produced, this does mean that it's very difficult to get a book noticed.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are very few authors where I would say I've got their whole canon here. Bill Bryson, perhaps.
Oh, wonderful Bill.
But probably nobody else. I just can't afford to... Oh, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Great, with new authors who've only written 3 or 4 books. That's not too bad. But once someone's got 10 books out or something like that, someone like Robert Harris, big thick books, or C.J. Sansom, you're looking at half a shelf just devoted to one author. So that can be quite difficult, because if you take another book in, you've got to take another book out.
We know this very well with our bookshelves at home.
Absolutely. When reps come round and try and say, here's this wonderful new children's paper flat book, lots of pictures for 7, 8, 9-year-olds. And I say, yes, but unless it's better than what I've got in stock already, why would I take it? Because I'd have to... There's a finite amount of space on the shelves. If I bring a new children's book in, I've got to get rid of an old one.
So are the reps quite good at knowing what your tastes are and what to present, or do they go away crestfallen because you said, look, I just don't have room for anything more than 2 new books from you?
No, some of them are very good, and they will say, no, you don't want this one, you don't want this one, you don't want this one, you don't want that one, but you ought to have that one.
So they develop a relationship with you.
Yes.
They know what's going to suit you.
They know my taste or the shop's taste, and that is reflected or reflects the taste of the local buying population. So you were asking earlier whether I just got books I like. I try to get the books that I know will sell, and so that's studying my customers, my regulars, and knowing what sort of books they want. So I will be offered a particular book, might be weird, about Concorde or a particular Boeing aeroplane or a particular tribe somewhere, and I will say, oh yes, I'll have a copy of that because I know someone who I can sell that to.
Right, yes.
So I actually do cherry pick some books like that.
Now, I wanted to ask about self-published authors. You mentioned them, and one of the things that you're sort of famed for in our Facebook world is that you're very welcoming to self-published authors.
Yes, that's quite a difficult thing to do, because I do get a lot of people coming into me. Some of them will say, my husband's written a book or my son's written a book, and I almost have to reject them out of hand, rather like somebody coming in saying, oh, my son would like a Saturday job. No, if your son wants a Saturday job, get him to come and ask for it. If you've written a book, come and tell me about it. Don't send somebody else to tell me about it.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's important to get the contact directly with the author.
I think so. And I don't mind if I get an email. Sometimes a copy of a book can be sent to me. That's good. But without that, I've really got nothing to judge it on. So if you want me to stock your book or arrange a signing for you or something like that, I do need to be able to read the book. I make a point of having read every book that I have an author here to do a signing for. I think it's bad manners not to do so. I think it's insulting to the author. I think it's insulting to my customers. So if it's not a good book, I won't invite the author in. So I can't have a bad book that I'm pushing to my customers. So if you get a signing here, you can be pretty certain I think you're worthwhile reading.
And it can be quite daunting if you're an author, going in and introducing yourself to someone and saying, "I've got a book, and would you like to see it? Would you maybe like to stock it?" What tips could you give to sort of ease that?
If you can come in and see me in person, that's the best way. If you write me an email or send me a letter, then you're putting a burden on me. I've got to reply to that. If you come in and see me, then we can talk and you can go away happy or sad. But if I've got to get an email and reply to it, that's difficult. The other problem with writing to me, snail mail or email, is that many authors expose their inability to use English correctly. And if they can't write me a grammatical email, I'm probably not interested in their book.
Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? Because that's how it is if you're applying for any kind of job, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You are applying for the job of having your book represented by the shop.
It's like a job interview, and the email you send is equivalent to your CV or something like that.
Yes, or the query letter you might send to an agent or a publisher.
Absolutely.
You are presenting yourself from the very first line. But it's interesting what you said about email and how that it feels more of a burden if something comes in by email, because email seems to have become this thing. We live in dread of our inbox.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's an email or a letter in the post. It's a burden because I've got to reply.
Yes,
I've got to do something.
Difficult.
If you come and see me, I can talk to you and knock it on the head quickly and either yes or no, or take a copy of the book or arrange to get a copy of the book. And talking to an author very, very quickly, you can suss whether their book's going to be worthwhile or not. In the same way that within a couple of seconds of meeting somebody, a customer, you know how to treat them. You know whether you can be cheeky with them or whether you've got to be really, really serious or whatever. Same with authors. You can tell very, very quickly because they are just ordinary people. Whatever you out there might think, authors are ordinary people. Authors are people too. So
They're often scared people in those situations.
Often scared people. There's no reason to be scared coming to me, but.
And what about the pitch? I mean, do you expect them to be able to give a fluent and polished pitch for their book, or do you feel more relaxed about it than that? Because I think if anyone is asked to talk about their book and present it, they feel, oh my God, I've got to do justice to it in 2 sentences, elevator pitch.
No, and I think it's probably very difficult for someone to pitch their own work like that, particularly if they're in the early stages, they're self-published, and it's that important to them. I have a bad habit when I have authors here. I mean, obviously, I try and grab customers and steer them towards the author. So I will often pitch the book to the customer for the author. And some of them,
you do that. You're really good at it.
Some of them are quite surprised at the way I pitch their book because they don't think they've seen it quite in that light. That's fun to do, but then it leaves the author time to say, no, he's wrong, what it's really about is X, Y, Z. We're
always very grateful when someone can do that for us, by the way, because I've been in the hot seat and Peter said, oh, it's like this and this and this, and I thought, why didn't I think of that? That's brilliant. And someone who can do that for you, it's greatly appreciated.
Well, that's the difference, you see. You're an author, but I'm good with words.
On the subject again of self-published authors, I wanted to ask about books that are published by CreateSpace. CreateSpace is perhaps the most common of the print-on-demand services that authors use, self-published authors use, to make their print books. And I mean, is there a problem with getting books from CreateSpace if you're a bookseller?
Yeah, there are huge problems. One is that CreateSpace is an arm of Amazon, and a lot of people produce their books through CreateSpace, but they don't bother then to get them registered with Nielsen Book Data, which is the modern books in print. It's the database of all books available in this country. They get an ISBN from Amazon, but they don't register it with Nielsen. I don't know, perhaps technically you have to get your own ISBN to do that?
I can answer this actually, because I publish my books through CreateSpace, and you can register them and the ISBN by emailing Nielsen. There's, if you look for the Nielsen website and just follow the trail, it is quite easy to find, but you can find an email address and you can send them an email and they'll send you a form and you just fill that in. It's a Word document that you fill in and keep a copy on your computer and fill it in every time you have a new book. You fill in the ISBN, you just say who you are, what the book is, and you can also send them a copy of the cover, and that's free. And it will then go into the database and you'll be in the Nielsen database. You can pay for an upgraded listing, but you actually don't have to do that to be in the database. You can get a listing in the database free, but Amazon won't do this for you. You have to actually do it yourself.
If your book is not on Nielsen Book Data, then as far as every single bookseller in this country is concerned, it doesn't exist.
That's interesting.
If it doesn't exist, it's not a proper book. If it's not a proper book, you're not a proper professional author. If you are serious,
they might not know about Nielsen.
Well, then that's a lack of professional knowledge.
The difficulty is that when you put your book up on CreateSpace, they give you various channels that are for what they call expanded distribution, but they're mostly American. And it does perhaps filter through to a few of the wholesalers in this country, but am I right in thinking that most of the wholesalers can't actually tell the book exists unless it's on Nielsen?
That's right.
Is that it?
Yes, that's right. The other thing about CreateSpace is that it makes for a very difficult route to market. Where's the profit for me in buying a book from Amazon direct at the same price that a member of the public can buy it for themselves?
Yes. Now, when I supply books to you, what I do is I order them in bulk from CreateSpace, and I get them shipped, and I get them at a discount, and then I supply them to you at a discount. So I have to price the book so that by the time I've given you a discount, I still make some money. Otherwise, there's no point in me making it. And then that has to be so that you can sell it for the same price that it would be online.
Absolutely. And basically, you're turning yourself into a mini publishing house.
Yes, and so pricing is quite a difficult thing, because something you've often said to me is, well, the price of some of the print-on-demand books is a bit high.
Yes, something that should be $7.99 or $8.99 is often $11 or $12.99.
And that's often because it's not the author being greedy, it's because of the production costs, because print-on-demand books are more expensive to produce.
All books are print-on-demand. If you go to Clay's,
Sage.
If you go to Clay's, it's basically
Clay's is a Printworks.
Huge Printworks, yes. But I think the cost there for a paperback book when you're printing thousands is less than 50p.
Yes, I remember a statistic that I saw in a presentation about book pricing, print book pricing, which said that traditional publishing houses need to be able to put a markup of 8 times. So the cost of making each book, the cost of each book, is 1/8 of the cover price. But of course, they've got to add in lots of other things like warehousing and distribution and
all their admin, human resources department, lawyers, accountants, all that sort of thing. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
paying for office space. Like I have to pay for a bookshop when Amazon don't have to.
Yeah, well, they presumably have to pay for something.
They pay for a warehouse.
Yeah, the massive warehouse and
But that's
drones.
that's a lot cheaper than a high street frontage.
Yes, yes. Well, as we've been skirting around Amazon, and there's no steam coming out of Peter's ears yet, but I'm going to give him the chance to vent or say something about the threat from online. What's it been like? What have you noticed in the, because you've been a bookseller for long enough to see the effect that online
It really is impossible to tell, because the economy nosedived a few years ago, 6-7 years ago, and so that's leached book sales. There's been a rise in e-books of various sorts, which takes some readers away, but I understand a lot of e-books that are sold are either free or very, very cheap, and probably only 20% of most of them are ever actually read.
Or readable.
Or readable.
Oh, we shouldn't have said that.
Oh, I didn't say that. The author said it.
The author and editor.
The author and editor and book doctor. I think it's impossible to quantify that. It is noticeable that more and more people are coming to me and saying, I'll order the book from you. I've looked it up on Amazon. Can you get me this? For a variety of reasons. One, as I hinted earlier, they want me to be around in a couple of years' time when they need university books for their children. We can provide a service that Amazon just can't match. We know books and we can track things down. We can use databases that are much more sophisticated than those available to the members of the public. And we have knowledge of the book industry here to enable us to hunt out the right book for the individual.
Yes, I've actually seen you presented with an obscure book in German and trying to track down where to get another copy of it. Did you find it in the end?
I very rarely fail. Yes, I'm sure I did. Yes, yeah.
Because you seem to have resources that were well beyond what the places most of us would know to look for a book.
Yes, I'm also lucky that some of my early background was in computing with IBM, doing a lot of work with databases, and I have an understanding of databases and how they work that enable me to mine them more effectively than most people can. Particularly, I'm also conscious of the mistakes that are made by the ill-trained monkeys that type the data in the first place, so that I find ways of getting round likely the obstacles and problems. But that's just fun. That's part of the job.
Well, something else I wanted to ask about the effect of online was, is there a difference now in the kind of books that people buy now compared with what they used to buy when bookshops were the only place to get them?
Wow. I don't think so. No. I don't sell many Catherine Cookson, Miss Reed, much chick lit, or a great deal of cheap popular fiction, largely because I think that's catered for by Smiths and Sainsbury's and Waterstones and people like that. I think people are buying same sort of things they always did. A lot of people come in here and buy real books still, buy the classics.
That's very good to hear.
Buy books by good authors, established authors, but also modern authors. Yeah, there's always demand for Terry Pratchett. There's always demand for John Irving. There's always demand for Richard Harris. People buy an awful lot of Robert Harris.
Richard Harris? He's the actor.
Richard is the actor.
Unless
yes.
he's written a novel, I would like to know about.
No. There we are. You see, I can get words wrong. Yeah, people around here buy a lot of travel books, a lot of history books, so quite a lot of serious books. But that's always been the case in Leatherhead, and I can't really speak for bookselling in a different town.
And also the benefit of having them together on a shelf. So I notice you've got a fantastic collection of World War One, World War Two books, and you've got them all together where they can be seen. And it would be hard to replicate that online.
Very difficult. I mean, Amazon try. If you like this, you'll probably like this, but it's not quite the same thing, and you can't compare and handle and sniff.
You can't see the design of the book,
No.
which makes a lot of difference to the reader experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just the weight and the heft of a book. Everything about it is part of the appeal to the reader.
Yeah, actually being able to feel it. And something else I wanted to ask you was about signings. You host a lot of signings here. Are there any tips you can give about getting a signing, and also any do's and don'ts about making them a success?
Write a good book.
Always, it's got to start with a book being good.
It does help to have a good jacket on it. We've discussed in the past one that had the wrong jacket on it, produced by HarperCollins in a previous show. Engage with the public. You've really got to put aside notions of being bashful and mouse-like and hiding your light under a bushel. You've really got to talk to people and just have a conversation with them. Customers like that, they appreciate it, and as they get to know you, in the same way that I get to know an author with deciding whether to take on their book or not, if somebody gets to know the author, it'll make them much more inclined to want to buy the book. If they like the author, they will think they're going to like the book, and they probably will, because it's words coming out of the same brain.
Well, that is, yes, because when you read somebody's book, you're spending time in their company. So I always think that one of the best advertisements for a book is to see what the writer's like. If you like their company in person or on a radio show or TV, this was the way books were always sold, but wasn't it? By appearing on Parkins, if you'd written something
absolutely.
interesting.
I mean, I always think that a book is almost a gateway to the author's soul.
Yes, and also when you've read a book and really enjoyed it, you feel you know the person who wrote it. Even if it's fiction, even if it's quite obviously something where they've had to make a lot of it up because it's in a time that isn't the present, then you do feel like you've got to know them.
Absolutely. And almost invariably, good authors are really nice people to know.
Well, I'm not going to argue with that. Let's have some music to finish with. And, you don't know what it is, do you?
I have no idea. You're choosing this one.
Okay. It's another piece of music that's inspired by a famous work of fiction that is probably within these
War
walls.
of the Worlds?
It is War of the
War of the
Worlds!
Worlds, yes!
It's the eve of war! Let's go.
Bye-bye.